Hello, everybody. We just opened up the webinar. Thanks for joining. We're going to give it one more minute before we get started.
This is where we should tell the attribution joke, Jeannette.
Oh, unfortunately, I don't remember it. I have
I
to
only
look
remember
back at my chats.
the punchline was something about deemed savings. So we'll let everybody else, while you're listening and settling in, come up with whatever that was the punchline. It's about something about deemed savings. I'm gonna look
Yeah,
it up because I did.
bonus if you could have a joke about attribution.
Attribution.
I don't know what the bonus is, but just
A virtual high five.
virtual high five.
An old cold code book.
An old
Yeah, we'll send you outdated code book. Good idea.
Off cycle code book.
I think we can get started. I think we have a lot to cover. This is going to be recorded, or hopefully it's being recorded right now. Thanks everybody for joining. We are here to talk about building performance standards and a utility attribution framework. I'm Jeannette LeZaks. I'm with Slipstream, and I'm joined by my colleague Darren Port. Slipstream, for many of you may know, but Slipstream is a nonprofit with a mission to accelerate climate solutions. And we do that through research, programs, education and training, and financing. Like I mentioned, I'm here with Darren Port. I'm one of our directors of research innovation. Darren, I'll let you briefly introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, folks. I'm Darren Port. I'm a building code policy advisor at Slipstream, working on all matters code related.
And I'm going to pass it along to Carolyn, who will introduce Clearly Energy and kick us off for this webinar.
Yeah, thank you both, Darren and Jeanette and Zach, who does have jokes up his sleeve but didn't want to give us any attribution ones. So I am Carolyn Sarno Goldthwaite. I'm Vice President of Customer Engagement for Clearly Energy. Clearly Energy is a small women-owned business, and we're policy nerds, but we're also software nerds. So we like to say we work at the nexus of public policy and software solutions. So our whole premise is really to try to take climate policies and implement them in the most equitable way possible. So thank you for being here today. Next slide. So a little bit of housekeeping first. So I know that at least one person has gone in and figured out the chat, but there are two opportunities for you. So first, there's a Q&A. So if you have a specific question on anything that we are presenting on today, feel free to put it in the Q&A section on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. You'll see it says Q&A with a little question mark. You'll also have the opportunity, if you're like, oh, I love that question, different than what I was going to ask, you can up or down vote that particular question. But if you want to continue the conversation or you like what you're hearing and you just want to reaffirm, please use the chat function for that. And we will have some questions to ask all of you later on. But this is what we're going to cover today. And if anything, the three takeaways that I would love for you all to see as you listen to the presentation is really that there's a greater, broader opportunity for collaboration, especially amongst local governments, state agencies, utilities, and other community partners. That there is a need and a way to streamline data access, and that attribution in particular, utility attribution, is cool and fun and right, Jeanette and Darren, it's important. So, so hopefully by the end of this, you will also agree with that and you will learn something. So we appreciate you spending your afternoon with us as we go over a very important topic of what the heck is utility attribution and why should it matter to me? So I'll go through the next slide. And actually, if you want to jump over to, so how do we arrive at utility attribution for such a fun topic on this lovely afternoon? Or I guess, well, it's still the afternoon, I guess, even if you're on the West Coast, unless you're our friends in Hawaii. So good morning still to the folks in Hawaii. This all came from a U.S. Department of Energy grant, which Clearly Energy was the prime for, and it was called Designing and Implementing Building Performance Standards in Small, Rural, and Urban Communities. So this is where the chat function comes in. If I say to you building performance standards, what's the first jurisdiction that comes to mind for you for if I say building performance standards? Like X jurisdiction has adopted building performance standards. Chat in and let us know what's the first one that comes to mind. Let's see. I see New York, Seattle, DC, New York and DC, Evanston. I love it. I love to see Evanston, Cambridge, Denver. Oh, Brett, I'm with you. I want to see it for Rhode Island. I'm with you on Rhode Island. So those are all amazing locations, amazing jurisdictions that have been doing amazing work for the last several years on adopting and implementing building performance standards. But this project really kind of flipped it around and thought about how can we support jurisdictions, regardless of their size, with adopting and implementing benchmarking, building performance standards, or a lead by example policy, which is where a jurisdiction, regardless of size, adopts a policy to disclose their own energy disclosure, and saying this is what we're doing with our own buildings. And so as part of this project, we had a number of cohorts with our partners that you see. Many of them are on the line today. Thank you for joining. Thank you for all of the great work that you did over the past year and a half for this project. But we had cohorts that kind of came together. We gave them technical assistance. We gave them software solutions, including the Beam platform, which ClearlyEnergy owns and manages. And being able to help these jurisdictions with, while they're adopting and thinking about implementing a policy, so they're not necessarily drinking from a fire hose, we can connect with building owners to help advance their policies. We developed covered buildings list, and then innovative funding models, which is in part where we land today and is an important topic, because what we didn't want to see is to have this great project, and at the end of the project, what was supposed to be 3 years, at the end of that project, everything goes away. We didn't want that to happen. We wanted to think of replicable models that we could use for the cohort and innovative ways that we could fund and move forward with benchmarking and building performance standard policy. So what did we learn? Go to the next slide. Thank you, Vanna. So this is what we learned from the cohorts. We learned, we had 5 models, and we learned very early on that best laid plans, we need to have different approaches to meet the needs of our stakeholders. No big surprise. They valued the time to connect with their peers. They were able to talk and, kind of had a safe space for them to talk about complementary policies or some of the challenges they had. They were able to share their resources. We saw an increasing number from small towns. So you all mentioned, state of Rhode Island, DC, Cambridge, Denver, large jurisdictions. But what we started to see throughout the work in this project was smaller towns and counties interested in adopting a benchmarking or building performance standard policies. Towns like Bedford, Mass, Falmouth, Maine, and Washoe County, Nevada, which is amazing to see. And again, as I said before, lead by example. But with that also came some challenges, which you're probably not surprised to hear, is access to utility data. They had staffing considerations because they had maybe 1 person and they're doing the job of 5, probably like many of you on the call. A challenge connecting with building owners, which is not something unique to the jurisdictions, but also we know a challenge that many utilities have. They needed technical support. They needed data analysis. They need to get the data, which was one particular challenge. They needed to do analysis on it, and they needed software solutions. And then again, that question of long-term funding kept coming up again. And so with this framework that was put in place, what we wanted to do is to be able to think about how it could be something that could be used in the long term, and that this isn't a burdensome policy. These are beneficial policies to everybody. And so this is where utility attribution comes in, and that it is not just a benefit to the utilities. This is a benefit to the building owners and a benefit to the jurisdictions. It really is something that works across the board in a unified approach that everybody can join together to achieve mutual climate goals. And so I thank Jeannette and Sarah, though she's not here because she's home with her new baby, but that she also birthed this lovely report as well, and Darren for their collaboration and partnership. And thank you all for joining. And I will pass it off to Darren, who is going to explain what the heck utility attribution is, what's BPS, and what's building performance standards. Why are we here, Darren?
Thanks, Carolyn. I'll tell you all why we're here. So you go to the next slide. And so first I'm going to introduce our utility working group. These were the folks that informed the report that we will elaborate on in just a moment. So there's approximately 60 members from across the US and included utility admin, evaluators, state energy offices, nonprofits, the national labs had a role as well. We met 6 times in about a year's time from June of 24 to June of 25. And the members' contributions included insight into the challenges and opportunities for utility attribution, particularly related to BPS utility attribution. And of course, reviewing the many versions of the report and the logic model until the final version that we'll speak about today. In addition to the utility meetings, we did also conduct about 7 interviews with various utilities of various sizes. And that helped us identify utilities that have interest, current or in the near future, in using the framework for BPS attribution. So a great thank you and a shout out to all the folks that attended over the 6 meetings, made comments, provided information and connections. So again, thank you very much to the Utility Working Group. And go to the next slide. So that year-long process, that effort was, like I said, informed the framework and led to the final report, which we'll speak about today. So again, a shout out to Jeannette and our colleague Sarah Wells for contributions and being the authors of this report. We're very excited about the potential that lies ahead. All right, we go to the next slide. So I'll spend a few minutes and provide just a very high-level overview of what benchmarking is, what building performance standards are, and how this all comes together under the umbrella of attribution. Go to the next slide. So what is benchmarking? In its simplest terms, it's really the tracking of building energy use, the measuring of the efficiency of a building and comparing that to similar buildings. There are many benefits to measuring the efficiency of a building, primarily to inform how to improve that building's performance, how to make it more comfortable, and reduce emissions, provide better indoor air quality, reduce cost, and there's many resources available to assist building owners in benchmarking. A lot of technical assistance. There's the Energy Star Portfolio Manager to record the building performance and compare it to other buildings. This helps inform the process for improvements. And then there are analysis tools such as the Building Energy Analysis Manager, otherwise known as BEAM. So benchmarking is really the basis or the precursor to BPS. And so what is BPS, you might ask? And BPS is the acronym for Building Performance Standards. And this is a policy tool that's enacted by states or municipalities to reduce emissions and energy use in order to achieve climate goals. And this is for existing buildings. States and municipalities can set the standard for what size buildings are applicable to the standard. So they establish also interim and long-term goals for the standard. So it could be a ratcheting down, let's say at 5% per year over time until, let's say, 2030, a particular goal of 50% reduction or net zero building. So for benchmarking, it's great to have that data, and having that benchmarking data informs policy and programs both on the state level and the utility level, but taking it to the next step, making it actionable. And that's where the building performance standard comes in. All right, you can go to the next slide. So currently 13 building performance standards enacted throughout the country. And in many ways, Carolyn asks, what was the first? And in many ways, a lot of these were a first of some kind. New York, a little bit different than DC, measuring different outcomes. The first large city, the first small city, the first in the Midwest, the first statewide. So a lot of firsts out there. There are approximately 30 other states and cities that are looking at building performance standards, enacting them. They're actively enacting standards, and then certainly many more thinking about it and considering and belonging to various cohorts that are assisting them in looking at building performance standards. All right, so you can go to the next slide. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into the matter at hand, and that is attribution and the utility's role in attribution. So you go to the next slide. So again, this is kind of high level, but what is utility attribution? So this is in the context of measuring the results of programs, initiatives, and support for codes. So this could be state or utility support for codes, and we can measure the effect that those programs, initiatives, and support have on energy savings, and the utility, the state, or other entities can claim the savings. So it's a process of determining how much energy savings or performance improvements a utility territory can be credited directly with efficiency savings. And so it's a very simplified approach here at the bottom of how this process works, and Jeannette's going to dive a little bit deeper into it. So you would simply, consider the programmatic and market factors involved. So what's the baseline, and then what are the programmatic or initiative or policy initiatives, and those can be incentive programs as well, that have affected a change or towards efficiency. So you identify the program impact, and then you quantify using MPIs and the logic model to quantify those contributions, and then finally allocating the savings. And there's either full savings or partial savings. There's even negotiated savings as well. So that is essentially an overview of utility attribution. So it's, again, measuring the effect or support of programs and initiatives by the utility. All right. So what is the role of utilities in benchmarking and building performance standards? So essentially, what is the influence or what is the support that the utility offers? And so utility companies have a lot of data. They're very effective and influential in the policy arena. So they have the potential to sway decisions and influence towards positive outcomes in the adoption of building performance standards. They can provide technical assistance and incentives to increase compliance and implementation once the policy is enacted. So utilities already have a lot of structure, program structure around incentives, things like light bulbs and heat pump incentives and so forth. And all of those, that structure can be translated to providing support in the BPS arena. So again, they can inform local impacts for both benchmarking and BPS. They can provide training and the incentives for the efficiency measures. So the next slide breaks it down even further, what the potential offerings are for a utility. So they can provide stakeholder engagement to builders, design professionals, building owners, folks that would be performing the retrofits, so they can expand their current efficiency programs even before the BPS is enacted, and offer financial incentives that would dovetail and support the BPS. So again, the training, the workforce development to all of the parties that would have some input or some influence in the BPS. They can provide circuit riders, folks that could work throughout the state to offer a hotline or site visits, again, to any folks that would interface with a building retrofit. They can support third-party professionals, or in places where their third-party professionals don't exist, they can help launch those programs, technical bulletins, guides, help with electronic permitting or plan reviews. So quite a bit of things that utilities can influence and support, and not just for market rate housing, but under-resourced building topologies or affordable housing as well. All right, so what are the challenges? And I think I have my notes out of order here. Bear with me. So what are the challenges for or opportunities for utility BPS attribution? And so there's always this kind of effect with the state has raising baselines. They're constantly advancing, code is constantly advancing, say energy efficiency goals are advancing. So how much leeway or what more can a utility offer in light of these raising baselines and efficiency goals? It's sometimes difficult to quantify the energy savings and evaluate the long-term challenges, particularly with BPS being over so many years. It's harder to quantify the effects in the short term and quantify the savings in the long term. Staffing and resources, just like in any program. A lot of times in our conversations with utilities, there's the folks that are working on code attribution, and then there needs to be separate staffing for BPS. So that could be a hindrance or a challenge for utilities. So again, just access to financing and incentives. But then on the other hand, lots of opportunities. So, a utility getting behind a BPS program can be a new source of energy savings, can help meet the goals, the saving goals. Lots of opportunities with the utility on board with the BPS to collaborate with various partners to increase savings within the existing regulatory frameworks. Lots of opportunities for the utility to have positive customer interactions. And then, of course, the utilities are already set up, as we mentioned, to provide these programs. So it's sort of a natural fit that they can then provide that same sort of training and customer service and incentives for the BPS. I want to just mention just quickly another challenge is actually double counting. So existing programs with utilities. So I don't know if Jeannette, you're going to talk more about that later, but the report certainly addresses that. But I thought I'd be remiss in not addressing the double counting. All right, so Evanston, Illinois. Speaking of a first, the first in Illinois, the second in the Midwest after St. Louis. So started with benchmarking, has been doing benchmarking for several months. That benchmarking initiative is supported by ComEd, so they wanted to assure that the benchmarking program would happen and that we would see the data. Also supported by MIA, the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. So they assisted or are assisting the city of Evanston in the tasks that are necessary for the benchmarking ordinance. And through the success of the benchmarking, they were able to launch their BPS program. And that's, again, the first in Illinois. That kicked off in March of 2025. And expected that the policy will cover about 500 buildings by 2031. And their BPS is directed at buildings over 20,000 square feet for commercial and over 50,000 for residential. So very excited for Evanston. Great success story from the benchmarking to BPS.
Thanks, Darren. I might
Yeah.
take over now. And
Yes.
the only thing I'll add here is that in addition to Slipstream and MIA, Illinois Green Alliance has also been really helpful in assisting Evanston. So I'm remiss there, and I will change that later in the slide deck. So I'm going to take us to the next step here, which is, now that we all know what utility attribution is, what does it look like for building performance standards? We understand what utility attribution looks like for a typical program, maybe like a furnace rebate program or air conditioning rebate program. What does it look like for building performance standards? But before I take you exactly to the framework, I want to talk about our logic model that we created. Everybody can follow along as a reminder in that link that I chatted earlier that takes you to the report. And we are going to go through a relatively fast version of everything. But it all starts with this logic model. For folks that are aware of, utility programs, a lot of programs rest on this concept of a logic model. It's really a graphical representation that gets from point A to point B, understands where the barriers are, identifies program activities, and really points to the desired outcomes that you would expect out of a program. This clear path is for the utilities is something that is really helpful for evaluators to understand the impact. So here's a barrier, and I'll actually maybe share my screen in a second. I'll show you the logic model in a second, but it really gets from point A to point B, and that point A to point B could be many years in this situation, but it defines the path. This last point is really important because individual utilities will want to consider how they create their own logic model. It might be different to them. We have an example logic model that we've created for this project. It would definitely need to be fine-tuned for individual utilities. Nobody is expecting you to read this. This is really just a way to understand what this kind of looks like. On the left side, there is the barriers and constraints. Shows you the utility activities, shows you the outputs, and then the outcomes. We identify the target markets. There are different target markets for each activity or each barrier. They could be policymakers. They could be building contractors. They could be hold on, make sure I got the building owners and managers themselves. And in this instance, I'm not going to dive into too greatly, but we're talking about a utility logic model that addresses both the policy advancement or the policy implementation. So getting the policy passed, get to that point, and then what happens after the policy is passed for implementation. The utility activities cross over. There is some overlap, and that's the coloration there. But worth mentioning, I'm not going to dive into this in great detail, worth just mentioning that there are several barriers from a municipal perspective. Darren kind of talked through it from a utility perspective. What is the barriers or challenges for utility attribution from a utility perspective? Carolyn teed up a couple of these challenges. This is probably not exhaustive. In each municipality, it might be different, but we see across the board that there are barriers to building performance standards, including, just plain, pushback on mandates, maybe a lack of awareness of costs or benefits or non-energy benefits. Municipalities may have limited resources, limited staff time, limited understanding. The access to capital can be a really insurmountable challenge, and utilities with utility incentive programs can help overcome that. Sometimes historic buildings can be harder to retrofit. This is not meant to be completely exhaustive list, but just demonstrates that there is these barriers on this left side. If we go back to here on this left side, that everything else needs to waterfall from. And so I'm just going to give you an example. So, with this barrier of municipalities with limited resources to facilitate, adopt, and enforce the benchmarking, a utility activity could be, actively participating at public meetings, providing comment on utility support, saying that utilities have, if a policy were in place, they would be able to put incentives and structure in place or technical assistance in place. And so that utility activity might have these outputs of policy or rulemaking materials, demonstrate the public comments, show letters of support. And then when we get, to the next step, then we have short-term outcomes where a state or municipality has adopted the BPS, and then we get to the end goal, which is savings, energy savings. In this case, this is energy savings. It could be emissions or another metric. So all of this is really defined also by market progress indicators. So sorry, I'm going to go back a little bit, but these outcomes, really, we need to be able to measure them. And this is really important for evaluators. I think I know some evaluators are out there. So, you need to be able to measure the outcomes, and how are you going to actually measure it? So key point of this logic model is to develop this market progress indicator so utilities know, have they gotten from point A to point B? You're not meant to read this again. This is all in you might be able to see it well in a zoomed in way, but this is all in the framework document as well. But this gives essentially a roadmap to say, okay, well, these are the data sources that evaluators can use to understand impact. And we'll come back to this in a minute when we talk a little bit more about evaluation. I'm just going to pause to make sure I know that there are questions coming in, but I can't do both. Should we wait till the end?
Yeah, there's just one that's in the chat right now,
Okay.
which is, I think we can hold until you're.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm answering it right now.
Okay, perfect. Amazingly, I can't talk and answer chat.
Jeannette, come on now.
I try.
But good news, at the very end, I found the joke. So cliffhanger, everybody. You got to wait for the joke. I found it.
Everyone's got to wait till the end. All right, well, I'm going to spend about the next 10 minutes actually diving into some of the evaluation methods to this framework. And then so hold those questions. We're going to try to leave at least 10 to 15 minutes, hopefully by the end, to see if there's any burning questions that have come up along the way. Actually, every time I jump into the framework, I actually have one more caveat. I have one more thing I want to mention. Before we dive into the framework, I want to make sure that it's clear in our framework development, we are defining this process using a market transformation framework approach. And the reason why I'm going to just spend a minute on this is because, we either have what we're calling, I'm not going to dive into this, there's more in the report, resource acquisition programs, your light bulb programs, your furnace rebates, your air conditioning rebates. Those are resource acquisitions. They typically get evaluated on a yearly basis. They have pretty discrete savings. They're easily measurable. There's a number of ways that resource acquisition programs are easier in some ways to evaluate. However, building performance standards, and Darren kind of teed this up, is there's a long-term horizon. There is these policies are multi-year in nature, and sometimes the savings wouldn't be seen for 3 to 5 or longer time frame. There's a lot of actors in place. It's not just one contractor. You have multiple contractors thinking about it in a whole building approach. There's possibly multiple levels of engagement in how people both adopt a building performance standard as well as implement the building performance standard. So when we talk about everything, we're talking about it from a market transformation model. And that makes evaluation a little trickier, and the framework a little trickier. And we're building off of other models of market transformation, especially ones that were used in energy codes. Building performance standards are for existing buildings, energy code programs are for new construction, and there are a lot of similarities. So we felt like it was okay to build off of that. I'm not going to we're running a little low on time, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but there are some benefits to using a market transformation model. I think I talked about it. It's longer term energy savings. The challenge is that the evaluation can be and attribution can be a little trickier. There's obviously longer timeline, but that also lends to for utilities that are thinking on a yearly or maybe biannual approach, it can be hard to think about it savings in terms of a longer horizon. There is initial investment in market transformation programs, and you may not see the savings, or you may have to assume a savings, and they may or may not be realized in the same way. And we can talk about how there might be inequitable distribution of benefits. It depends on who is getting at the beginning or who's at the end of a program. Those benefits may be seen differently by different people. But with all that, we do talk about this evaluation or framework from an RA approach. We're just not going to talk about it here. So, when we talk about the evaluation process for building performance standards, this is kind of the overview. I'm going to walk everybody through this. And I will mention that this will, if folks are familiar with some of the ideas around evaluation for energy code programs, this may look familiar. We found that it seems to be a viable approach, and we will talk about this in a little bit. We are hoping to apply this approach in as many utilities as are interested in applying it. But this is generally the framework. There will be some nuances in any individual utility. So, we start with a potential savings value. We want to understand kind of the realm of potential energy savings. Typically for building performance standards, this would be the number of covered buildings and the energy savings reduction defined by the policy. Like I mentioned, the time horizons can be pretty long, 3 to 5 years. And the evaluation period needs to kind of align with that performance period to make sure that the energy savings are being captured appropriately. We are assuming that the utility creates a program that addresses the whole building BPS approach as opposed to single measure rebates. That's the value of building performance standards. It gives building owners the opportunity to define how they want to get energy savings. And from the market transformation perspective, it gives like a more holistic way of thinking about your building. And then I think the only note is that BPSs could be, you could achieve the energy reduction or emission reductions using single measures. But when we want the most effective approach would be a whole building approach. So, compliance in building performance standards is interesting. I think I think I saw some IMT folks out there. Then they have a project looking at alternative compliance pathways. I will mention that, for building performance standards, there's a goal for energy savings. The municipality or the jurisdiction that is putting it forth wants to see the energy savings or emissions. So any building that is non-compliant, there may be tools to pay a fine, instead of compliance, but that doesn't get you to the really the essence of the goal of the BPS, which is energy savings or emission savings. And so, you could have alternative compliance pathways, and that IMT project should yield some really interesting results out of that, to understand how other cities are using alternative compliance pathways. But that means that maybe energy savings, the compliance period is longer. And again, there needs to be multiple ways of capturing compliance. The easiest way is saying anybody who's non-compliant is not achieving those savings. And so you could take that chunk out of that. So we're down to the yellow or chartreuse. I'm not sure what color that is. So for market transformation initiatives, oftentimes we want to think about what happens in what we call the natural market baseline, or naturally occurring market adoption. Will buildings or building owners choose to make efficiency investments regardless of whether there was a policy? Would they do it absence of utility intervention? There's a few ways to consider this, and this is where some of the evaluation pieces are a little tougher. You're trying to find basically the counterfactual of something that would have happened in the absence of the utility intervention and the absence of the BPS policy. And I'll kind of get to that in a second when I talk about research approaches. Oh, actually, here we go. So when we talk about natural market baseline, we're really the goal is to use a historic energy consumption, apply assumed energy savings over time, and then these are assumptions. Use a prior participation level to use it as an estimation for expected savings in the absence of a BPS program. A typical energy saving, for typical programs, you've heard of maybe the fact that utility programs may only actually have 1 or 2 or 3% participation, and that might be an appropriate baseline for that jurisdiction. So a BPS would definitely address more than 1 or 2 or 3% of the population. So that might be an appropriate, so that original participation value, the energy efficiency participation value, may be an appropriate value to use. The external market factors are, in some previous administration, we had federal funding. Maybe there might be future federal funding. There might be other external market factors that play into the changes that you might see in the market. And so that all has to be taken into consideration. All right, keep those questions coming, because I know that I just saw Maddie put that in the chat. So thanks for adding that resource on alternative compliance pathways. So the kind of last step is taking all this information and then applying this attribution value. Darren teed this up a little bit. Standard attribution could be determined through an expert panel of basically put everybody in a room, a virtual room maybe, and go through all the data that we'll talk about in a second, and try to understand how market progress indicators are showing utility effect or a utility influence. There is a method of a deemed approach that is essentially saying we don't have to every few years we don't have to do this evaluation process. We're just going to assume an X number of savings or X% of savings based on research. Also, both of these are going to need to be based on considerable research, and that research is coming back, comes back to the market progress indicator. So it's all coming back to these data sources that we originally developed in the logic model. This should be exhaustive. I mean, I shouldn't say this list is not necessarily exhaustive, what you see on the screen, but when a utility takes on this task or this program, the data sources should be as exhaustive as possible. So it could be certainly participation data, compliance data from a BPS database, but it also may include interviews and surveys from program implementers trying to understand how utilities were influencing the process, building owners, building contractors. They all play a role. These are the target markets for which we want to understand from their perspective how a utility played a role in the success of the program. With a minute left for me, I'm going to try to just mention, Darren teed this up, but what about double counting? So, a utility may have an existing efficiency program. They may have an air conditioning or heat pump rebate. They may have lighting rebates. What happens if there's a BPS policy and the utility wants to get attribution for supporting the BPS policy in a place where they already have maybe a typical energy efficiency measures in place? So this is where that whole building approach really comes into play. Those resource acquisition program elements, those individual widgets, should be packaged as a whole building approach. It will, in the end, that is a big lift, a big ask of utilities. I understand that. But it is also really important to make sure that then the utility can claim savings for that whole area from a whole building approach. Utilities might have programs that they surely have programs that touch jurisdictions with BPS and jurisdictions without BPS. So, one idea is that those existing resource acquisition programs could be accounted as usual, business as usual, for those that don't have a BPS. And utilities should have enough information based on addresses to parse those out. That, I think I explained that more simply than probably it will happen. So it's probably more complicated than that. And I understand that. So I think very quickly, I can go over this, Darren, you can go over this, but then we'll get to questions in a second.
Yeah, I'll just say simply, we've got the report. We're ready to implement or find some pilot projects. We are in the conversation with a couple of utilities, but we're ready to provide the technical assistance and the research to understanding, utility initiatives and programs to customize the logic model and look at BPS attribution models. So if you're a utility or working with a utility, a program implementer or evaluator, be in touch and let's see if we can work together towards claiming some savings from BPS initiatives. Thanks.
Great. Well, I think that's it for our presentation. That leaves us with 10 minutes to talk through anything that came up in the chat. Carolyn, I know you were monitoring it.
Yeah, there was a couple of comments. There's one that
Okay.
was answered already.
Okay.
That Darren answered that had come in just in general about utility programs. And let's see, thanks to the Limerick Rodney, but let's see.
I'll just add to that one question about, I think the crux, we're talking about attribution. So while there isn't necessarily direct incentives to the utilities, they can certainly claim the savings from their activities through attribution. And then, certainly I imagine utilities negotiate with the states, and there's probably opportunities there to find some initiative or some incentive that would encourage the state to move forward,
Right. So
or the utility rather.
I'll take one summarizing one of the comments that is in the chat, and then I'll bounce over. There's a question that's in the Q&A. So first, and you did cover some of this, Jeannette, but just to reaffirm what you had said, but how might BPS take into account existing EE whole building programs, such as normalized metered energy consumption programs, which might recommend similar or the same types of market intervention, especially any NMEC savings ranges. So you talked a little bit about this in some of the frameworks, and but do you want to elaborate or just kind of fine tune what you talked about there?
Yeah, maybe the only thing I'll add is that I don't know where where that's taking place, but it seems like that would be a great way for a utility to say, for a municipality in that utility territory who has that program, to say this is going to be directly helping you meet the BPS. It is a program, it is already a whole building program, if I understand that correctly. And that is one way that they can possibly even expand the program, because the BPS will need to have more participants probably than are currently there. Whoever the jurisdiction that is passing the BPS might be able to point them into the existing utility program. I think it's actually great to have something like that already in place, because not all utilities have something like that. And it's almost harder, it is a harder lift for a utility to think more from a whole building approach if they don't already do that. And then the only other thing I'll add, well, is BPS going to be considered market transfer? Yeah, so if I don't know if I want to dive entirely into California right now. I think that
that's a whole other webinar.
Yeah.
We hope that we can dive into a little bit more in the future with the California models. I think the only thing I'll say is that it still feels like, the MPRE framework should be considered. I think there's probably some regulatory things that need to be discussed on a state by state basis. I don't know if that's somewhat of a non-answer, but I think it needs to be considered.
Yeah, but I think the thing is, we're definitely aware that California is a different model. I believe there's a half-page call-out box on California in the report, and in many of our interviews and conversations, we definitely recognize that it's a different model than the rest of the country, and there could be other utility territories that have other differences as well.
Right. Which is, I think, again, another takeaway is that we know that it's not a one-stop shop, that there has to be some customization, recognizing regional state differences for the different utility programs. So certainly California is its own thing. All of the states are its own thing. So I
think there is, I will say, they're talking about, Derek mentioned something of the RA programs. I do think RA, there is a way for utility attribution to move forward through resource acquisition and not market transformation. It just needs to take into account the longer horizon of building performance standards and kind of when those savings would take place. So maybe just some challenges to try to sort through.
Great. Well, let me throw another question your way. Here's an interesting one for you. So how do BPS programs metrics play into this? Would a BPS that uses energy efficiency metrics lend itself better to utility attribution than those focused on emissions?
So the two thoughts, maybe yes, maybe it would be, I think it could lend itself better. Where emissions come into play, we we talk about it a little bit in our report, in the framework, but, you know, we're kind of assuming one utility is doing this and not, you know, it's electric utility or a gas utility, but what happens if both of them are working together, and, you know, towards an emissions goal. And I think maybe there's ways to account for that. I think it's hard because it's kind of joint accounting, between, you know, different utilities, but I think it is possible. It just may be easier if it was energy. I don't know. What do you think, Darren? What do you think, Carolyn? I don't know.
I think no, I
Yeah.
agree. I think that it could be on the more on the energy side than first emissions, but Darren.
Yeah, no, I think we had this discussion with DCSCU and because in New York, because one was focused on emissions and the other on efficiency. So it's definitely a factor that we could dive into further and tease out some further information. Sure.
Yeah, I guess I also think that it's not, I don't think that one metric is better than the other. I mean, the whole goal and intention is to get to the utilities to the place where they can figure that part out, where they can claim savings to help the jurisdiction. So it's great. Whatever they have, we've crafted a framework to be able to work around and meet them where they're at. And I think that's the broader takeaway. So. All right. Now, I don't see any other questions that are in there. We'll give it a moment for folks to chat in. Oh, I see one more comment. On the other end of the state perspective, the primary West Virginia energy utilities would tend to view these types of programs as a challenge to their profits. That's why I'm asking the question. Yeah, and I think so for those of you who may not have seen Robin's question that she put in the chat early on was, are there direct financial incentives to the utility? So maybe Jeannette, could you or Darren just give again that 30 seconds on like what's the benefit to the utilities? And again, for those of you who may not be aware, West Virginia is an interesting case because they're not required legislatively or through their Public Utilities Commission to offer rebates and incentives. So what say you? What's your 30-second pitch to a utility on why they should do this?
I think one of the biggest benefits is the relationship that the utility would gain in supporting policy like this. It does, you know, I think it is a challenge if they are not required to do energy efficiency programs, or in like, for example, Wisconsin's case, where it's not one utility program, it's a joint utility program across state. So there are some regulatory challenges that are not insurmountable. I think they can be addressed. I think the benefits can be, you know, the relationship building with their communities, you know, supporting the communities and their energy goals, even if it's not necessarily the utility goal. It seems like those are two clear benefits. Darren, I don't know if you have any others.
Yeah, I think it's primarily the relationships, you know, the opportunity to shift, you know, from this, you know, the vision of utility, you know, just, you know, extracting dollars from the community to here, you know, helping keeping dollars in the community because they're reducing energy usage and promoting, you know, climate solutions and so forth. And you know, and utilities are really an integral player. So you know, they have the data that we need to demonstrate the compliance with the BPS. And so I think building, it's all about the relationships and getting them on board.
Yeah, there might be others, and if you have any ideas, feel free. You have our contact information. Definitely would love to talk more with anybody about this topic. We like this topic, so
we do. We love this topic so much. We have a joke that our working group came up with, although we appreciate the limerick Rodney gave us.
I like the limerick.
But the joke is, and this is, you know, I'm going to preface it, it's not great. I mean, it's good, but it's nomad. You will be when you try to estimate it. That was the joke, remember? So, you know, it's kind of like a dad joke, but I don't want to say that those are better, but it's there. That was our joke that the working group came up with. So, All
So
right.
with that, we are at
We're at
time.
time.
If you have any more jokes or want to talk about utility attribution, like Darren mentioned, we are hoping to expand some of this work in additional service territories across the country. So feel free to reach out if you want to talk. So
Somebody resonated with the joke. I appreciate that.
I know, yeah, that's great. Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Darren. Thank you,
All
Jeanette.
right. Take
Thanks,
care,
Zach.
everyone.
Hide in the
Thank
background.
you.
Bye.
I know.
Mhm.